Can we start now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Can
All
we
right.
start right now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our panel on From Prompt to Production, Operationalizing Agentic LLM Systems. Today we see like AI is growing at a very rapid pace. We have seen AI evolve from simple tools to complex autonomous systems. And today we are diving into the practical challenges of building, scaling, and trusting these agentic systems, understanding what agentic means and how it's impacting our lives. I am Harsh Varshney from Google.
Hey, yeah, so I'm Rahul. So we are from IEEE Silicon Valley chapter. So yeah, so we have a phenomenal panel of experts with us today who will help us dive into this topic. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and first do a round of introduction, then we can jump into the questions. So yeah, Yuvin, do you want to get started first with your intro?
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you all. My name is Yubin Kim, pronounced she, her. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I came to Pittsburgh to do my PhD at Carnegie Mellon University. My dissertation work was in information retrieval, so I'm a search scientist by training. Since I graduated, I worked in a few different places. I worked at UPMC, worked in medical AI for a while. I worked at Etsy, which is where I really got into e-commerce. And today I'm the Chief Science Officer of Vati. We're a Gen AI startup, and we work with e-commerce businesses to optimize product catalog data for the AI world. Grubhub and Academy Sports and Outdoors are some of our first customers. So I'm really excited to be on this panel.
Thanks, Yubin. Yeah, let me see who can go next just on the screen. Abhay, you are next on my screen, so you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Hello, everyone. I'm Abhay Khosla, and I'm currently working at Google as a software engineer. I'm working on the safety aspects of Gemini and other Gen AI products, making sure that they are safe by design and they don't output any content that violates any of the Google policies. And these policies are in place to make sure that our users are safe and they get the best possible information from our Gen AI products.
Cool. Thanks, Abhay. Yeah, Harsh, you were saying something, I think.
I was just saying, nice to meet you. We can move forward. I think Gautam, you're next on my screen. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Rahul and Harsh. Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gautam Solepale, Vice President, Software Engineering Manager at US Bancorp. Over the past decade, I've led large-scale engineering programs, modernizing enterprise platforms, streamlining developer workflows, and driving digital transformation across aerospace, banking, and retail domain. My focus has been on building robust and scalable production-ready systems. Very happy to be part of this panel discussion. Uh, my screen, I think Harsh, I'll pass the mic to Shaleen.
Hi, thank you for organizing this. My name is Shaleen. I'm part of Google's AI Mode team, where we are trying to build the most helpful universal search engine for finding everything on the internet. And so we generate LLM-powered responses on top of search results for information-seeking queries. I've been in this team for over 5 years, but previously we were working on AI overviews. And before that, we were working on ranking models like MUM and BERT. So yeah, I'm hoping to have a fruitful discussion today.
Thanks, Charlene. So let's dive right in. Let's begin with the first part, like what agentic means, what exactly this is. So we have seen LLMs, like as I was saying, like evolve from like basic prompt-based tools to now complete autonomous systems where like they can, based on a given prompt, they can do like a bunch of stuff for us. So in one sentence, like uh, what does agentic mean to you in the context of AI? Let's start again with Yubin.
Yeah, so I think agentic has a wide set of definitions. So in the research world, when we're talking about agentic systems, we're talking about LLMs being used to orchestrate different components of a system, right? So instead of an if-else system, now it's an LLM making those decisions what to call next. But in reality, I think in business, when we say agentic, it more broadly means AI systems that can automate complex human tasks. And so I think a lot of agentic systems lie somewhere in between those spectrums.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ave, you want to go next?
Yeah, that was a good introduction, Yubin. To me, agentic means like someone, in layman terms, I feel like someone gave arms and legs to a brain. So AI by itself is just a brain you can talk to, and basically you can get as much information as you want from it, but it cannot take actions on your behalf. So the moment it starts taking actions on your behalf, like an itinerary planner agent, basically, it can book tickets for you, it can book hotels for you. So once you give it some capabilities to basically make an impact in the physical world, it becomes an agent. So that's how I think about agentic AI in general.
Yeah, totally. Charlene, you're probably working on some cool stuff with regards to agentic stuff.
So yeah,
What are your thoughts on it?
precisely. I think I'll echo what Abhay said, but I would rather just put it as like it's the difference between saying versus doing. So an LLM foundationally would tell you what to do and how to solve your problem, but it becomes agentic when it has the capability and the tools and infrastructure to actually execute those tasks. In effect.
That makes sense. And Gautam, what?
Yeah, adding to what Shalin just mentioned, right? I would just add on to it. Agentic AI, as the name signifies, when do you go to an agent? So when you need someone to plan and facilitate things. So it plans, facilitates, adapts autonomously to deliver the defined actions and outcomes within the defined guardrails is what I would call it as an agent.
That makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I think next
Okay.
question. Yeah, go ahead, Harsh, if you have any more questions on this.
No, let's move on. Let's look at like the initial hurdles, that we face while developing. Let's say now we have like good understanding of what agentic systems mean, like brain with some capabilities to do certain kind of actions for us. So what are the initial hurdles that we see? So let's thinking back to your first agentic systems project, what was the hardest problem that you didn't anticipate at the start? So um, let's start with you, Gautam. Like, what was it for you in the enterprise space?
Uh, I mean, as soon as you just said the word enterprise, the immediate thing that comes into my mind is integration. So
Mhm.
enterprise primarily comprises of all the legacy and modern systems. So one of the major overhaul that I saw was integration overhaul, right? So overhead. And we had to integrate systems with to work with legacy infrastructure and compliance checks, existing APIs. It was far harder than model experimentation itself. And secondly, the change management. So we underestimated how much organizational processes and risks reviews will slow down adoption. And thirdly, one of the major thing which we started facing as soon as we started building agentic frameworks was the data quality, because many workflows kind of lack the structured and reliable data pipelines. And I mean, even if we had data pipelines, it was different from initiative to initiative. So uh, we needed production grade system, I believe. Is it the same in other enterprises as well? Like, Charlene, can you throw some light into it, please?
So, yeah, I mean, uh, I think it is similar for enterprise systems. I have not worked on many, but one of my biggest nightmares of working with agentic systems is is it executing the correct tool code correctly? So, for example, if I was to build like say like a software engineering agent, since we understand that terminology well enough here. So if say you are asking it to write and execute code or say deploy systems in production, it's great to give it access. It generally tends to work, but evaluating these systems becomes really, really hard. For example, the risks of it executing the wrong piece of code or deploying or bringing down a service becomes very real as you move towards an enterprise system. And many times, like as you introduce more and more tools, since the topic of this panel discussion starts from the prompt to productionization. So even in the prompt part, it grows huge. Like you're giving it a lot of tools, so it gets really confusing to the model which tool to use when. For example, if the query is like a general query, not seeking any information, and you tell it that, okay, you have access to like look up information on Wikipedia, and you ask a query like, hey, how are you doing today? The model still needs to know that, okay, it doesn't need to use that particular tool to answer this kind of a question. And controlling that behavior is one part. And the second part is evaluating at large scale that this will reliably work for most cases.
Totally fair. I think the problem of hallucination is real with LLMs and like with newer models with like more token ingestion and output. Like it's getting better, but like definitely like with large number of tools with like bigger prompts, it definitely does get a bit hallucinated. Which brings to the next point, which is like the common pitfalls that you were mentioning, Charlene. Like, what's a basic mistake or the blind spot you have seen teams repeatedly make when developing agentic systems, and how do we think like we can, avoid it? Abhay, you have worked across research and production. What do you see?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Basically, I see this happening a lot when you do implement something in research. Everything is perfect. You see the world with rose-colored glasses. Your inputs are perfect. Your outputs are perfect. So everything works. And then you decide that, okay, this works. We are going to publish a paper, and then we are going to launch it as it is in production. But there are a lot of blind spots that happen when you launch this in production, like the real user data is not at all close to the research data that we can provide. And even though no matter how much we can mimic, like you can never be perfect in terms of mimicking the real world behavior. So your inputs to your agenting LLM systems can be very imperfect with a lot of ahs if you're doing audio transcription and basically integrating your agents into that. So you have to be careful of that. Uh, your tools in itself can be very flaky. Like sometimes you expect it to work, but it doesn't work. There can be 500 errors, the tool is down, and you have to plan your workflow around that. So there are these lots of things that basically go into productionizing a research system. And like, I think you need to be very careful about these things from the beginning. And you got to make sure that basically we treat LLMs as very smart agents that can do a lot of things. But when you build a production system around it, I think you have to switch your thinking to thinking of the LLM as the dumbest part in your system, because it can hallucinate, it can make a lot of mistakes. So your production systems need to be in a place that they can take charge when the LLM fails. So they need to be the supervising adults in case your LLM fails. So just having a very strong infrastructure around your LLM and knowing that your LLM is not perfect and it can make some mistakes will take you a long way when you basically productionize these systems.
Totally, that makes sense. That was like a great insight from like the research angle. Yuban, I'm curious to understand your perspective because like you are in a startup sort of environment where like, things need to move fast and like what kind of pitfalls do you see with, building agentic systems?
Yeah, I want to double click on what both Abe and Gautam actually said. So I think one of the biggest things that people forget is the human factor, right? So Vadi, like we're a B2B business, right? We're selling to enterprise clients. And whatever fancy ML thing we come up with needs to fit into an existing workflow. We need to do the change management. Like, so the human factor of AI adoption, I think, is actually one of the biggest hurdles as you're trying to take research into production. Um, And I think a lot of teams underestimate that, like how difficult it is to engender change within an organization, especially bigger organization, especially in legacy organizations, which need these types of tools the most. So the other thing that I do want to click on is the fact that these LLMs are mistake prone. And so for us, our solution is to expect failure. There are too many edge cases for us to ever try to predict everything. So we strongly believe in adding in easy ways to manually override poor output or poor decisions. And we make it so that it's not just we can override, it's that our customers can override. A non-technical customer can log into some UI and they see an action they don't like, they see a result they don't like, they can immediately fix it. Really, yes, multiple safety guardrails, but also fixing mistakes needs to be really, really easy. Yeah, that edge case management is, I think, something that can blindside first-time teams for sure.
There's a question in our panel which says like, how do you know if the agent has made a mistake?
Yeah, that's the neat part. Sometimes you don't. But yeah, I think what I've seen like when agent starts making mistake is uh, identifying it is granted it's really, really hard. You would see signs of it in, let's say, unintentional tool call usages or like no tool call usages, for example. So what I typically try to do is I try to run a bulk inference on a large set of prompts. So when you do that and like, let's say you do perform some analysis like in a collab or something where you parse all these responses and try to check for whatever you intend as what the model should have done. Even if it's something like as simple as a regex check to see if specific tool calls that you want the agent to have executed, like for example, if you have a travel agent as an AI, it should be looking up prices of the information. So you should see, okay, how many queries actually hit that backend, which was to return the price of the flight. Things like how many payment gateway hits were made. Then you could, of course, look at interaction data from users, like live experiments typically like would have signs of whether the user followed up with a booking request or something or not. Another aspect here is like models could sometimes be doing the wrong thing because they do this thing called reward hacking. So they're trained using reinforcement learning, right? So we have these reward functions to train them to take certain actions, but they may be not representative of what you want the model to do. Like one of my like colleagues always gives me the examples of playing Mario Kart, where you are racing against a bunch of people and your objective is also to collect a bunch of those coins as you are racing through it. Now, if your reward is based on how many coins you collect, that's a perfectly valid reward. But the model could make mistakes. Like, for example, it might just go very slowly or go around in circles, just collecting rewards, but not really care about actually completing the race. So aligning what your rewards or your prompt is trying to say, and that really matches the product definition that you've laid out for your agent, is often the gap whenever agents tend to do the wrong thing outside of the syntax and semantics errors, things like that. Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Let's move on to from prototype to productionizing the system. And when we think about, productionizing the system, the first thing which comes to mind is scale. So the question which comes is like, what are the biggest technical roadblocks when, taking an LLM agent from the prototype to a reliable production system? Which Gautam, you want to go with this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so when we talk about migrating from prototype to production, the I think the first and foremost thing is that we should expect no black box surprises in production. And obviously, the failures had to be predicted with clear fallback paths. And I think this is where I second what Charlene just said, right? So all the scenarios where the reward hacking takes place has to be predicted before in hand and has to be thoroughly tested. The second point that I would like to bring up is about the scalability and latency. So in prototype, when the scale is possibly small than the production data, orchestration bottlenecks often is not visible and often becomes in production, it often becomes a limiting factor, right? Not the model itself, but the orchestration bottlenecks becomes a limiting factor. And security sign-offs. So where we deal with all the rigorous security and compliance validations like PII, GDPR, etc., will have to be validated thoroughly before a model goes live into production. And all those scenarios has to be thoroughly tested, and risk assessment has to take place before production. Before we move on to production, uh, what do you think, Eubin, from B2B perspective, how does it take place?
Yeah, so for us, let's see. So for us, like the biggest technical roadblocks, there's some of it that is like your typical challenges of inferencing at scale, right? So you want to think about, how can we make these models more efficient? So, you don't want to be calling, uh, for the Google folks in this call, you don't want to be calling Gemini Pro 2.5 all the time for all of your decisions. So how can we construct more efficient models to be able to act at the same level of intelligence? So that's definitely like a big technical research roadblock. But in terms of like the bigger problem really is just like the sheer engineering part of it, right? How are we monitoring model results? Like how are we catching errors? How do we do outlier detection? And also, one of the things that I want to mention is how do we set up a good workflow to continuously improve our models as the models are already online. So this means like how do we set up good training data collection to automatically retrain the models, then you're managing model version to version changes. And also, there's like a new LLM model drop like every 3 weeks, it feels like, right? So then the question becomes, how do you construct a infrastructure such that you can easily upgrade to the latest version and the latest and greatest of the new open source model without having to change everything around it, right? So that type of upgrade, like thinking about how you're going to continuously improve your system has been a big technical hurdle for us. Yeah.
Interesting. I think your answer briefly touches one of the questions in the panel again, like would search AI become the mainstream when it comes to agentic data verification and validation? So I personally haven't used search AI, but definitely like companies which are doing a lot of verification and validations like are coming upfront. Like I've personally used LangGraph, and it offers Langsmith, which provides the observability tools and also helps with the evals. So it definitely helps, like making sure like your agent is moving in the right direction. Anyone in the panel who has like a different view on this question, or anyone wants to
Yeah.
bit?
Michael, do you also want to give some context on if we don't know about it? So what does Search AI do? So that yeah, we can answer your question better. Okay, he might not be
Oh,
available.
sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. Yeah. So Search AI, I don't have a lot of information about the company, but I heard a lot of rumors about how they are penetrating into enterprise marketplace with their specialized so-called specialized agentic data verification tools into banking, into pharmaceutical, into even industrial automation. enterprises. So that's why
Hmm.
I don't know too much about the company. I just wanted to see whether or not the experts on the panel would have any insights about this company.
Yeah, if anyone has more insights into this, please go ahead about agentic data verification and validation.
I don't have much context about this particular organization, Surge AI, but what I do realize is like there are technical limits to what all we can verify. And of course, it's going to be a really important part because data is very useful and like one of the more significant parts of any like model or agentic system. But diversity of that data is far more important than let's say the quantity. Like if it captures different sorts of patterns, that is far more important. And the depth of knowledge in the domain that it's aligned to is also very important. So if you're, for example, if you're training an agent that is healthcare oriented, if that data that is being used to train already includes a lot of specific cases in depth rather than, let's say, everything on the internet or like Wikipedia pages about certain topics. Like domain specific data is often very useful. So yeah, developing that depth would be very important to whoever is trying to build like data verification systems.
Okay.
That makes sense. So like we did briefly touch upon like like what we want to verify, measure. So like beyond accuracy, what evaluation metrics matter the most while measuring, the success of the agentic system in production? Charlene, like what do you think? Like at like you work at Google Search, like you must be like, making sure that, we measure things before we roll out.
Correct.
So in your opinion, like what do you think
Yeah,
we
no, of course. So, yeah, there are a lot of metrics that we look at, but uh, it is very hard to say which one or two metrics might be more important than others. But some of the very important metrics that we look at is how helpful are the responses. And that is where we want to be very careful in making sure, like, for example, if someone says hi, I don't want to give them information about how the word hi came into usage. I would just want to say, hey, how are you? So things like that. So making sure that the answer is helpful to the user. If the user is asking about information on some restaurants, we would give them exactly just that, not a bunch of tips about how to choose a good restaurant. Second big factor is factuality. A secondary aspect of factuality is groundedness. So factuality is always giving the right information and not making up information. And by groundedness is a very related concept, which means that you have a source that you can attribute that information to. So if you are saying that the restaurant is open right now, it should actually be open. And it should have an attributable source, which could be the restaurant website or say a Yelp page, which has information about that restaurant. So we would want to like measure factuality. There could be other aspects, like for example, the trust and safety, which I think Abhay might be able to add more color on, where we want to evaluate whether the model is delving into parts which it shouldn't be doing. For example, healthcare recommendations. If the model is not expected to do that, it should never be doing that. Things like expressing political opinions. If you're building a travel agentic AI system, and someone's asking about political opinions, it could land an enterprise into unnecessary challenges, or maybe persuade people to believe that it's like aligned with certain kinds of political like strongholds. So in order to avoid all that, we'd want to have those specific metrics for each different domain as well. Abhay, I'll let you probably take over and discuss some more metrics.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you alluded to a very good point, Shaleen. Having these metrics is really important, especially for big organizations like Google. I think if you do one mistake, you run into a PR risk and the stock market goes down. So you have to be very careful that you are basically capturing these metrics beforehand. So we have very recall specific metrics. Like we want to always be on the safer side rather than saying something stupid. So that's why you might see a model sometimes might say no to benign queries like which might be of medical nature, but like given the model is unsure, it won't want to give you the wrong advice. It would always be on the safer side because the way LLMs behave and they talk to you in a very authoritative voice. So we who work in LLMs, we might have more understanding of knowing how to use these as tools, but not as our masters. But for some layman people, like they would treat it as ground truth, and the outcome of that can be very sabotaging to a lot of people. So that's why like we have these extensive set of policies in place, which these LLMs should adhere by before they put any outputs. And corresponding to each of these policies, there are also KPIs that we track regularly, and there are humans and LLMs working around the clock to basically make sure that whatever is being output from these models is correct. So yeah, I think trust is a big thing. And as we are delving into more of this world of agentic AI, this trust piece will have a bigger and bigger role to play as you move towards giving these agents more capability to act more autonomously on your behalf. So having this trust metric would be really useful in terms of defining the relationship that you have with the agent.
Totally.
Yeah, I have some thoughts to add from our context. So for context, where Body uses agentic system is the whole process of like, you get a bunch of product catalog information from your vendors and like PDFs and spreadsheets, and how do you take that and transform it into like well-structured, organized product catalog data for your PIM that is also like optimized for downstream search, downstream AI applications. So this entire thing is what we use agentic systems for. So for us, we do a lot of the same things, like measuring. So when it's doing like copy generation, measuring factuality, is it like the appropriate tone for this particular brand? Is it mentioning, key attributes, all those things? But another thing that we really care about is the impact of the output on a downstream system, a downstream business metric that we care about. So for our customers, the downstream metric is, conversion, like conversion rate, revenue, sales. So a big part of the evaluation that we do is, okay, like we've used this agentic system to improve catalog data. Great. Did it make a difference in terms of business ROI? So the downstream effects of the system is something that we care a lot about as well, especially for a B2B business.
Totally. That totally makes sense. Let's move on to the orchestration and debugging. So we understood like productionalizing the agentic system and like the key metrics that we need to take a look at. What does effective observability look like? Like how do you trace and debug a multi-step reasoning process that might fail in production? Charlene, like you directly work on this. Like what are your thoughts on this?
So I'd say in multi-step reasoning systems, what becomes critical for delivering a helpful response is your LLM is no longer your bottleneck. LLM systems will behave in just like a language model. They'll replicate, they'll try to summarize things the way they do. But the ultimate helpfulness of the response is largely governed by the data that you provide to the model. So things like prompt engineering and context engineering specifically becomes far more important than the LLMs, which like different size models will definitely provide you some significant advantages in how rich you can make rich of a response you can generate overall. But your data is what ultimately governs how helpful the user will find that information. So maybe referencing one of the examples that if someone's trying to look up a restaurant recommendation in Washington, D.C., and they express that they want to, like, let's say, go for a family dinner, which serves, let's say, wine and has vegan options available. we would want to break that down into like some structured format of queries, which we can look up from, let's say, proprietary data sources, from a knowledge graph that an enterprise system might have, or from, let's say, even human voices content. Let's say if people are trying to promote or talk about a specific restaurant on like social media websites like Reddit, TikTok, or Instagram or somewhere. We'd want to pull in information from there and then try to give like a holistic response to the user saying that, okay, these are some popular hotspot, or let's say some famous celebrity, let's say Lady Gaga went to some restaurant recently and talked about it. That may be some useful information to plug in there. So what we would try to do is like have like a multi-step agent, which in the first step, we would ask it to generate some information needs where it could say that, okay, I want to do these database lookups, these queries, these searches, et cetera, get all those responses. And there is a lot of work required to engineer the context that you give to the model to generate the final answer. So you would be doing like ranking for all those sources, that the information that you got from different sources. You would be stripping out unnecessary information. Let's say you get a whole article from Washington Post about a new restaurant that's opening. You'd want to trim it down to like the specific part. You'd want to run summarizes and get specific parts, so you can fit everything into like a sufficient model context to have the model generate the final response. Yeah,
that makes sense. Abhay, what are your thoughts from the trust and safety aspect? What kind of observability, like you prioritize while building all these agentic systems?
Yeah, so I think Shalin gave a very good overview in terms of the things that matter from a reasoning perspective. I can talk about more from a systems perspective, that how do these things translate to how you implement these things in a production system. So like effective observability is basically composed of things like metrics, logs, and traces. So you basically need to have a very good infrastructure around these things. And it has to be user centric, and it has to be SLO driven. Like it's important to have low level metrics like what is your CPU consumption like for these individual agents, what is your memory consumption, but you should also be tracking things that matter to the user ultimately, like what are the error rates the users are facing, what is the request latency for these people, and what is the success rate for all these things. And like in order to do that, basically you need to make sure that you're collecting the right data at the right places. And in order to do that, basically you need to make sure that the granularity of the data that you're collecting is correct enough, because you can run into a random unknown problem in the later, but problem in your system later, but your data needs to be fine-grained enough that you can basically construct those metrics. And in order to construct those metrics, it is very important that basically you provide the right context around that data. Why did my model fail? If my model failed, what was the input to that model at that point? What was the output to that model at that point? Did it fail only for a specific user, or did it fail for all the users? Did it fail for some people in a specific geography, or did it fail for like regardless of that? So these things have become highly essential for you to track. And tying it back to the user story, like how do you tie it back to how it matters to a user? Basically, you track each request with a trace ID. That way, basically using that trace ID, you can see, like, because an agentic system can be comprised of like a million moving parts, and like it is very hard to track a request without this trace ID and see how it went through. So having that trace ID really helps you get your hands dirty into the issue and then basically observe inferences. While doing that, a good practice that comes into practice is basically as you're moving through the system and you see that, okay, this Gemini Pro model or Gemini Flash model failed for this particular user. A good check at that point would be to basically make sure that the other users who are running the same models, are they also running into problems like this? So this basically helps you take a single user problem and make sure that you cover all the holes in the system using that particular problem. So having a good monitoring and monitoring infrastructure around the things that matter to you, with the cardinality that it can be extensible to the unknown unknowns that you will see in the future, I think it becomes highly essential in terms of defining effective observability.
I agree with you 100%. Like I believe like it depends a lot on the system, like the kind of agentic system that you're developing. Like the complex the system becomes, like it becomes like the agency increases with that, and like with that, like unpredictability increases. So like we need to have like breakpoints at every step, and like we need to do evals like after every like certain checkpoint or something, like making sure like the output is coming correct. Another, I think, crucial aspect, in my opinion, would be latency in certain agentic systems. For example, voice agents, which are getting like super popular these days. In those kinds of agentic systems, like latency becomes very much important, because you're talking to an agent at that point, and like if the agent takes forever to answer, like your experience is not going to be great in that way. Let's move on to the next part, which is how are we going to balance this at scale? So at scale, how do you balance the trade-offs between cost, performance, the quality of the agent's output? Let's start with Gotham. How do you see that in your enterprise systems?
So any other software system, right? So when we talk about, I think safety and how do we commercialize the agentic system, I think safety and guardrail would be the major thing to talk about. So I look at it as a 5-layer framework where first policy and guardrails comes into picture. So whenever, I mean, before any code hits production, we define clear boundaries on what the system can do and cannot do, where the limitations plays a role, and where like aligned with our compliance and governance frameworks. So we treat this like API, versioned, auditable, and easy to explain to the stakeholders. Secondly, runtime safeguards, things like sandboxing, throttling, anomaly detection, circuit breakers that stop the system if it starts behaving abnormally. And you want live controls, not just static rules, right? So thirdly, fallbacks and overrides. What if scenario, right? So every workflow needs a safe defaults, confidence thresholds, and human in the loop for edge cases and or for low confidence scenarios, right? So you should fail safe, not fail open. And fourth, transparency and explainability, right? If we just go back to observability, right? So black boxes don't scale in the enterprise, so we need traceable reasoning paths. So we need the breadcrumb trail, logging and user friendly explanations, so people trust the system's decision. And finally, continuous monitoring, like any other systems. Guardrails aren't one and done, right? So as the system scales and evolves, regulations evolve and business needs change. So guardrails must adapt to. So the bottom line, start restrictive, earn trust over time, and only then give the system more autonomy.
Sounds good, like putting guardrails into the system so that it doesn't go too off track.
Mhm.
Charlene, what do you think of the trade-offs that like between performance, output, like how do we see?
So I fully agree with Gautam's like response here. Like we should have some kind of branching mechanism, and also like we should have like a selection mechanism for simpler cases where you don't need a bigger model to answer very simple questions. But I'm also super optimistic about the direction the models have taken now. So what I mean by that is, with every generation of the LLMs that are being launched by various companies around the world, um, smaller models are able to do similar things, which the previous generation's larger model, like one tier above, like whatever that was able to do is now like slowly similar things are being done by a small models. So I have a rather optimistic view that moving on, the latency trade-offs are going to become easier to make. So when you start developing a system, like an agentic system, I would say optimize ruthlessly for quality. But when it comes to productionization, it depends on when you are going to market. So if you are going live today, of course, you have to make a trade-off. You have to draw the line somewhere and try to pick a size, pick an infrastructure or whatever mechanism you have of branching to make sure that like at least 95% of your queries are like routed through like a very efficient mechanism. Like only the harder complex questions go to a model which is very expensive to run or takes a long time to run. There are mechanisms of like UX advancements that have happened around it as well. Nowadays, most of the agentic systems have a way of streaming thoughts to the user, so they have some visibility as to what's going on. It doesn't really solve the latency problem theoretically, but it just makes it easier for the user to process the latency, the time it takes. So it knows that, okay, I'm going to look up information. It's very important to design the right UX around latency as well. If you let the user know that, okay, this is a complex question, this is what I'm going to do, but why don't you just grab a cup of coffee? I'm going to like search the internet for the best flight prices and do whatever and give you like a proper document. So similar to what deep research agents typically tend to do. Uh, so that kind of insight gives users confidence and a larger tolerance for latency whenever you do have to run like longer latency systems. But that said, it should definitely be like a trade-off which you make based on like the budget that you would want to have for the average user.
Definitely. I think it acts like a progress bar and gives users more insight. Okay, like this is how it's happening and it's still working while, like things come up and, while in the background they can like have more latency to process and get the right answer. Yuban, I wanna hear your thoughts on the trade-offs and the guardrails that you must have put in, working at your startup.
Yeah, honestly, nothing like super new to add. I think like Shalene and Gotham made really good points. Yeah, so we definitely also have that like cascading style approach of like the easy stuff gets solved by simpler models, and the hard cases get sent to a more expensive model. And for us, some of our use cases, like some of our problems don't even need an LLM, right? Honestly, like like a good chunk of our problem space is solvable by traditional like tree-based approaches, or just like a much smaller like BERT-based embedding model with some like classification head attached to the top. So we're a strong believer of using like the right tool for the right job and using the right combination of these things, so that we are uh, efficient in how we use our resources. GPUs are expensive these days, and like it's really hard to get A100s and H100s out of cloud providers. Um, I've actually previously had to like so I don't know if folks know, but like for example, on like GCP or AWS, you first need to like get approval for a quota to even be able to reserve GPUs that have A100s in them. Once you're approved for your quota, you still need to actually be able to reserve a machine as it becomes free. So I have had to write like scripts that sit there and trying to reserve a machine like every 5 minutes in order to be able to get access to these large GPU machines. So being careful with our GPU resources is very important, especially for a startup that does not have infinite access to GPUs. So yeah.
That makes sense. Well, we are coming towards the end of this discussion. One question I wanted to ask each member of this panel, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is starting up, with their first agentic LLM project tomorrow, what it would be. Let's start with you, Abhay.
One thing I would I take this to heart as well, and I would really encourage everyone who's building a agentic system. Uh, Agents are there to assist humans. They are not there to replace humans. It just enables humans to do more complex tasks that they would do without these agents. So always have a component of human in the loop when you're building an agentic system. The way it helps is basically it helps you build trust in the system, and with the human in the loop, you can keep the LLM in check. And once you have, it's like a game. Once level 1 is satisfied for the level, you give it more difficult tasks. So you give it increasingly complex tasks to keep building trust in the agent, and at the same time, the humans who are in the loop also keep on upgrading themselves. So before completely autonomously giving an agent all the capabilities that you want it to do, start with the human in the loop, and it will pay itself in the long run by generating training data, by maintaining trust in the system. So it'll be super useful.
Thanks. Charlene, you want to go next?
So yeah, I think my closing thought would be that when you're building these systems, you should make sure that the agent feels like it should be designed for like corrigibility rather than just the capability of answering. So what I mean by that is you should encourage your agent to ask for help or ask for clarifications whenever it makes sense. Humans are not very like a lot of humans are not very good with like how to give all the information in the same go. So if it makes sense for your system, make sure that your agent has the tools and resources to ask the user for questions. It would not be a very good scenario if it spends a bunch of time, spends a lot of GPU resources to answer a simple question and it gets it wrong. Incentivize for like all alignments, not just efficiency. And yeah.
Gautam?
Coming from a regulated environment, my closing advice would be I would recommend to start with a narrow use case, invest early in observability and safety, and iterate quickly. Production grade systems evolve through incremental trust building, not big bang launches, I believe. So that would be my 2 cents.
And what would you say, Yugan?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything everybody said before me. I would say care about the workflow that your agentic system fits in, especially in specialized domains. So like I've experienced in healthcare, right? And a lot of healthcare AI fails because the computer scientists building the model or the workflow don't consider what doctors have to do in their day-to-day in the office. And they're like, whoa, why aren't the doctors using our new amazing system? And it's because it doesn't fit into their workflow. So I think really thinking about the environment in which your system is going to be acting in, and how in the end, we're all trying to help people, right? So having your eyes on the end goal, which is how do we make our customers' lives better, our users' lives better, I think is the most important thing.
Makes sense. Rahul, any closing thoughts?
No, I think, yeah, just wanted to give people in the audience, if you want to ask any questions, yeah, we can take a few questions. Okay, so yeah, if we don't have any questions, yeah, Professor Vishnu, do you have any closing thoughts?
1 second, let me. Yeah, I don't see any questions.
No, yeah, so if you have any closing thoughts, since we are coming to an end of the panel, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. With all your encouragement, we will continue to host events like this. And thanks everyone. Great thanks to the speakers for very insightful discussion. It was very lively and insightful, and the audience apparently are enthused by your insights. They stayed through the program, so it's really good. So please keep in touch, everyone, and good night.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.